Hi, thank you so much for inviting me to present. I'm honored to share with you a little bit about my thoughts on sketching, visual communication, and really how this thought can be applied to anything that you pursue. The at the core of my message is how to apply yourself in a way that will allow you to excel and be really great at whatever it is you want to do. In my case, it was sketching, and so I'd love to take you through this presentation. What follows is going to be a voiceover overview of this presentation that I've given over the years as I've traveled throughout the United States and around the world and shared this with schools, businesses, and individuals as a means of conveying my passion for visual communication and design. So please sit tight, feel free to take notes, and I hope you enjoy. So let's dive into the process of sketching itself and kind of what that means and how it works. So very rarely do I ever sit down and just come up with a final idea and just say, hey, I'm done. I'd be really wealthy if that were the case. Unfortunately, it does take me a few iterative tries to get to that solution. But the reason I like to think that happens is our brain kind of gets in the way. Even though our brain is the genesis of ideas, and that's kind of where these fleeting ideas kind of spark and start and develop, we're still interpreting fuzzy pictures. I like to think of as fuzzy mental pictures. But the more aware we are of the process, I think the more successful we'll be. So it works something like this. We start at the top of the circle, visualizing in our brain the concept of what we want to draw or execute. And then the next step, right, so the idea is here, the next step is to then use your arms to draw the first line or the first circle or whatever the case may be. And then we evaluate with our eye. So we look at the paper and we say to ourselves, either, wow, this is really good, or this is not good. And at that point, you either crush your drawing up and throw it away, or you make a correction and you work with it. But whatever the case may be, just being aware of this process is going to help you so much more. Because what I find is that sometimes students, when they're just starting out drawing or sketching, they'll actually get really frustrated with this process because there's a lack of understanding of what the process is going to be, and a misalignment of expectation going into the pursuit. So as long as you understand this, it'll increase your chances for success, I think, as a sketch artist or as a designer. It's important to have a conversation with your sketch. Essentially, be present, be aware, and be mindful as you're sketching and drawing. Humans, when you're talking about sketching products or things, humans, we bring logic, we bring order to chaos. That's what design is about as well. It's bringing order to chaos. So even drawing something, like there's a methodical approach to something like this webcam, for example. You can see that I started with an axis. I have my ellipses, curves, and so forth, and adding details to then create the final thing. As with mastery of any other language, mastering your visual communication skills is going to take dedicated effort and continued practice. There are no shortcuts. So one question I get a lot is, what makes a good sketch page? And the answer is really about four things, I think. The first is form. So take a computer, for example, a desktop computer. I might start out sketching a few form ideas. Okay, what does this thing look like from multiple angles, multiple perspectives, and so forth. The next would be function. So how does it work? Maybe the side opens up and it's a modular case, neatly organized, and so forth. The next thing is context. So not only do we give form to things and function, but communicating where they live and why they deserve to exist and how they better the life of the person using the product is a really important part of telling the complete story. So perhaps this computer has a rail system and it lives under a desk, for example. Just a simple example there. The last thing is detail. So what are the kind of sweet little things that make this thing so awesome? So it might be locking tabs, it could be locks, it could be lights, whatever the case may be. It could be vent details, that kind of thing. But when we bring all these elements together, you can see that now I have a sketch page complete with form, function, context, and detail. Okay, so sketch page, form, function, context, and detail. Here's another example. solar powered backpack, then this is all on one page, but you can see I've got my form, function, context, and detail. A few other examples that don't include all four elements but still function in part to tell a story. Here you've got form and function. You've got context and form, for example. Here's form and detail. Okay. And another example of form, function, context, and detail all on one page. These are some microwavable food trays that I did for a client. But you can see that on this sketch page, there are these elements that are all included to tell part of that complete story. So we don't really use this so much in spoken language as much anymore, but there are certain formalities to speaking and using written communication. The same could be said for visual communication. There's certain levels of sketching, and I find that this helps me decide how to best utilize my time, because the audience essentially determines the level of sketch that I produce and how efficient I will be with my time. So the first is personal communication, and this is the type of sketch that I would do for myself in my sketchbook, not meant to be shown to anyone per se, but more as a record of my visual thinking. So they tend to be more gestural, loose, overlapping, rough, something that I can interpret, but not necessarily something that a client would be able to interpret on their own. Thinking or exploratory sketch is another example. So here's an example of the type of sketching I do when I'm iterating something that I may show to a client or another designer, a contemporary of mine if I'm working in a studio, for example. And these sketches are iterative. You can see that you start with one form and kind of evolve and develop these ideas and concepts as you go on. The next would be functional or technical sketching, which relates to the idea of storytelling that I talked about before. But in this case, things like exploded views, how things fit together. I like drawing robots, so here's an example of the head of a robot exploded, and a kind of a luggage shopping cart type thing. Presentation sketching, and at this point, this is where you clean everything up and you can show a client kind of the really sweet sketch to kind of sell the idea and hit it home. And typically here I'll take a sketch that I've done either on paper or digitally and then further enhance it in a program like Adobe Photoshop. Sometimes, however, I do keep the sketches analog, as in this case. But here's another example of sketching with a pencil to Photoshop and so forth. So that would be my presentation sketch. Lastly, I've got the emotive sketch, which is another example of a sketch that I would use to evoke or convey some excitement, perhaps, to sell the idea. So typically using things like unusual, unconventional points of view. It could be skewing proportions and details. It could even be dropping the lines from a sketch so it becomes more ethereal and more painterly. Or in this case, it could be capturing the essence of an object without being so descriptive in its lines and details. So something like motorcycles, for example. I love these sketches. I didn't do them. This is my friend, John Mullenkamp, did these, but I really like them because they capture that excitement of the motorcycle and the energy of that product. So what is the secret sauce here? What's the key to getting better as a sketcher, designer? And I would say this applies to anything you want to do in life. Well, talent is only really a small part of your pursuit. And I hate to break it to you, but there really is no secret pen, there's no secret paper. It's all about practice, practice, practice.